All right, everyone. This is going to be a new series we're doing where we go through the entire DFS slate for the NFL and give our thoughts and some of the plays we like. And then on Friday, we're going to be making, I think it's going to be 10 or it's going to be 20 lineups that we have. That's the tournament I'm in. So we're going to try to make, I don't know if we're going to make 20 different ones, but either way, that video will be on Friday. And once again, as we always say, look, I'm not an expert or anything like that. I'm just giving my thoughts. I love playing DFS. I love, betting on sports. So we're going to give our thoughts on that. But make sure that you always go, this should be helpful maybe for research and getting the gears turning in your brain, right, for the kind of lineup you want. But always go with your own opinions, right? So let this help you to think about some things, but in the end, always stick with how you feel. So we're going to start before we get into the individual players. I want to talk about the highest total games as the time of this video being recorded, and the lowest total games, and then games I'm staying away from completely. So let's start with the highest total game, which is the Bengals and the Bills. It has a total of 51 and a half, and obviously this is a game that has no shortage of star talent. You look at Joe Burrow, you look at Jamar Chase, you got James Cook, Josh Allen. There is a ton of talent here. And certainly, this is a game that I could see being high scoring. What did we just see the Bengals do to the Ravens, right? They really, really put a beat down on them. So we know with Joe Burrow back, he didn't miss a step. The Bills' defense, is it as good as it's been in past years? There's some questions about that, right? The Bills' offense, is it as good as past years? No, but we also know that the Bengals, their defense isn't necessarily the best. So we have what feels like a good mixture of talent, weak defenses, and all of that would get this game to be high scoring. The only thing to pay attention to is the Bills are really trying to slow the pace, run the football, right? We saw that at the end against the Steelers. Not to say that that's going to stop this game from being high scoring, because James Cook and Josh Allen, that connection can put up points even if they are playing that type of tempo. But that to me is the only real pushback I would have towards maybe, you know, uh, not being as excited as that number may say. But this is a game we're going to be looking at just because of the star power. And if we're making a bunch of lineups, you're going to have people that are in those games. The next highest total is the Colts and the Jags. Now, this is a weird game because on paper, so the total is 48 and a half. So that's 3 points lower than the Bengals Bills. But this Colts Jags game, the weird thing about it is on paper, I actually don't like this game at all. Right. When you think about the way the Colts play, when you think about the way the Jags play, the Colts do have a pretty, good defense. The Jags, you just never know if you could trust them or not. Obviously, offensively, the Colts have been great, and then the Colts have shown struggles. Daniel Jones is injured. So on paper, I really don't like this game, even with the high total. But there's also a level of, just kind of just from watching football over the years and watching football, this year, although these two teams haven't played yet, where this just feels like a game that you could have some crazy high scoring plays, right? Some crazy big plays, and you don't want to be completely missing out on that. So this is a really risky game to me. This game could be a game that ends 17-14 and is really ugly. This could also be a game that ends like 31-28. And depending on what game we get, will determine how much you should put in there. So if you're making multiple lineups, like I'm going to be, it's one of those things where you certainly need to make sure you have some Colts and Jags players in those lineups, but it's not something that I'm going to be, there's going to be some lineups where I'm almost fading this game, guarding against the potential of this thing being, 17-14. All right. The next highest total is a game we're going to be fading completely, the Rams and Cardinals at 48 and a half. And, when I say fade completely, is there a world in which a player on the Rams or a player on the Cardinals gets into a lineup due to their price? Sure. I just have a problem with this game based off the fact that the Cardinals, I just cannot trust them in any way, shape, or form to in the affirmative or in the negative. Meaning, I can't trust that they're going to be a great team. I also can't trust that they're going to show up and be a bad team. We saw this last week against the Bucks. A lot of my DFS lineups, I really like this matchup for the Bucks. I had Baker, I had Ibuka, I had Kate Otten, and the Cardinals did a pretty good job of making life miserable for the Bucks. The Bucks ended up winning, but that was a game. And when I look back on my lineups that lost, part of it was because of having those Bucks players in there because they just couldn't put up the numbers. Right, there were I thought chances, but it just didn't happen. And so when you look at this Rams team coming off a loss, and you look at the price you're going to be paying for a Devontae Adams, a Matt Stafford, or a Puka, makes you really worried about playing anybody in this game because once again, this could be a very ugly game. Now, it also could be the case that the Rams roll through, right? And in that case, somebody's going to go off, but I just feel pretty good fading at least the stars in this game because of their price, right? Because of what Puka is going to be priced at, because of what Devontae is going to be priced at, and we'll get into that after, and because of what Stafford is going to be priced at. So, I will say, like I said, there are cheaper options as we'll get into that are within this game, and maybe you consider that, right? Maybe that's the way you go. Okay, those are the highest scoring games. So we had a 51.5 and then two 48.5 point games. The next total is the lowest. Okay, so we're going to the lowest total game. So we took top three, highest. Now we're going to do top three, lowest. The lowest of the slate is the Titans and the Browns at only 33.5. This is a game that I'm actually considering, not in every lineup, but this is one I checked off as light. Okay, I do like this. Now, the concern is, both of these teams are untrustworthy, right? Completely untrustworthy. The only thing about this game that's trustworthy is that Browns defense is going to show up. And so I think the Titans have had their ability, right, to their defense has stepped up in some games. The offense has shown signs of potentially being something at times. So this is a game I'm gonna be playing some people in, even with that low total, just because I could see, is whether it's the running game or even with Shadur Sanders, right? Is this a spot for a person like Jerry Judy or something like that, right? These are really all things I'm gonna be considering. So I actually do like this game. It's not to the level of the Bengals and the Bills, but considering the total, people may be against it in a tournament, especially. There's a world in which I could see, some of these Browns players being good plays. Okay, the Broncos in the Raiders. This is one. The total's 40.5. So think about the difference in points, right? 33.5 for that Titans Browns. This is 40.5 for the Broncos Raiders. And this was a game I put a circle next to because in what that labeled was games I'm gonna probably put a few in, but I don't love, right? I wanted to distinguish between the two. And the reason I say I do like this is because first off, the Raiders and what we've seen from them, none of it's been good. So that leaves us open to a potential Broncos defense play here, right? There's a potential for that. It's also, you have to keep in mind, a division game. And so with the way the Broncos have been playing, is this a world in which the Raiders can, find a way to get some things going? And also, because of the Broncos offense and how they've looked, this is not something I would do in every lineup, but if there's a lineup where you need to pay up for a lot of guys and your defense needs to be as cheap as possible, is the Raiders defense at play here? I mean, you look at what this Raiders team, the stars of them, who's the biggest name? Max Crosby. Where does he go? On the defense. He's a defensive player, and you could see even in last week's game his frustration and how much he wants to win. And so the Broncos have not been immune to just playing horribly, especially on the offensive end, against really bad teams. Remember what they did against the Jets. So it's one of those things where I'm going to be looking at probably one lineup where I throw in the Raiders defense and maybe even one where I throw in the Broncos. It depends. I shouldn't say that for sure because if none of my lineups I need to actually pay up enough for those guys, then it's not needed, right? I think it's an unnecessary risk if you don't actually need the salary. But if you need the salary, potential, right? Okay, next one. Dolphins and the Jets. Now, this is a game I checked off as I'm going to be playing some people in it. Tua was another person who burned me last week. Okay, that I really thought I was getting over, one over on a lot of people. I was like, man, I kind of like this spot for the Dolphins, and he was just horrendous. I think he put up 5 fantasy points. And of course, we had him in a few leagues. So that was a disaster. But I always like maybe running it back, right? Maybe I was wrong last week, gonna be right this week. And I just, in my view, picked in that situation the wrong cheaper QB that went off, right? And so against this Jets team, which has been so inconsistent, there's gonna be guys in this game, whether it's Tua, A Chain, some of the receivers. I'm going to be mixing and matching some of those. I don't think it's a situation of, the Dolphins players are a must play by any means, but I would like to have one of those guys. On the Jets side, I think Tyrod Taylor had a great, second half. He still had some moments that left you scratching your head, but he had a pretty good second half, no doubt. And so I think there's also a world in which do you get Brees Hall in some lineups? Do you get some of those Jets players in there? I probably am going to stay away from both defenses. I mean, you could potentially think about the Dolphins defense, but it depends on the price, and we'll get into that in the end of this video. Okay, so those are the games that at the highest total and the lowest total, and the Dolphins total is 41.5, by the way. Now I'm going to go to the two games I'm completely staying away from. First, Commanders versus Vikings. Now, I put this in there, but there is a world in which I play some Vikings players. So I have that in there, but at the end of the day, Justin Jefferson, we'll talk about him in a second or when we get to the end of it. But I put it in there because I'm going to broadly be staying away from that game. But there are people on the Vikings side that I'm going to consider. Vikings defense, and Justin Jefferson are two people. So just to get that out of the way. The next game I am going to try to avoid at all costs, and that is the Seahawks and the Falcons. There is just no reason, in my view, to be playing people on either side of this. Now, there obviously could be an argument to play some Seahawks players, but the Falcons defense has had its moments, and the Seahawks offense just has not looked quite as good as it has in the past. So is there a world in which you put in Jigba in the lineup because you figure he might not be highly owned this week? Sure, I get that. But in most cases, I'm staying far away from that game. That's a game that could be very ugly. If I was to play anything in that game, I'm going to be looking maybe again at the Seahawks defense after they put up 30 points last week. So that would be the only thing I consider. Okay, so now let's flip over and let's get to the part my guess is most people wanted, which is going through each position. So we'll start here with the quarterbacks. Okay, so the first quarterback I have checked off as someone who will be in lineups is Josh Allen. Now, he is by far the most expensive here, right? He is by far the most expensive. But one of the reasons I think he probably is going to end up being, and this kind of depends how the lineups shake out in terms of money, because I'm saying right now he'll probably be my most played QB. But if I realize there's just not the value I thought, and my lineups don't fit well with Josh Allen, maybe you make that change. But after seeing what happened last week, seeing how all that kind of played out, I think at the end of the day, he's going to probably be primed for a big game, right? The offense was really run through the run game last week against the Bengals. We're going to see some running, but I definitely think that Josh Allen is, going to be vintage Josh Allen against this Bengals team. And if we get that shootout that we might get, having Josh Allen in the lineup, I know Burrow can put up points too, right? And he is cheaper, and we'll get to him in a little bit, but sorry, Josh Allen's ability to run the football, right, and get those running touchdowns. There's just a lot there for me to like, especially because one thing we know for sure is the Bengals defense is far worse than the Bills. Okay. Next one we wrote down was Lamar. Now, this is, I'm going to tell you, a risk, and it's something that has burned me in the past this year because I put Lamar in lineups just to kind of have, you know, uh, oh, he's going to have a great game, right? Over the last few weeks, he has not shown it. He looks injured, doesn't look great. I completely understand that. But if there's a game that they're going to need him, and a game, this is one of the biggest games of the year for them, right? This is for the division in a sense. I know there'll probably be another chance for him, but you win this game. Whoever wins this game is going to have a leg up. And so you have to consider Lamar, especially as his price is dropping. You just have to consider him. Next guy I'm considering is Joe Burrow. Okay, so with Joe Burrow, 6,500, same reason I think that you would consider Josh Allen. If this game is a shootout, then Burrow's a good play, and you're getting 1,200 savings from Josh Allen. So if your view is, hey, this game's going to be a crazy shootout, Burrow, as good as Chase Brown is, right? There's still more on that passing game with the Bengals, and so you get a little cash savings. You get a quarterback in that game. There are plenty of reasons to play Joe Burrow. I'm leaning towards Allen at this point, but maybe we make that change. Now, for the QB of the day that I like in terms of on the cheaper end, because it's always good to find. Oh, actually, I also have Baker 5,800. I did put him. He will be in some lineups. Um, New Orleans burned me last week a little bit, so maybe he's probably not going to be in a ton, but he was another one I thought as a little bit of a cheaper option. And then another one I'm considering here is Tua. 5,200 against the Jets. Don't hate running it back with him. You could make an argument for Taylor again. I just don't know if he's going to have those back-to-back, good games. So I'm kind of going off of Tua had a bad game last week. Maybe I fade into him. I see there definitely could be an argument for Shaw. Actually had a pretty good Tyler Shaw. Actually had a pretty good game last week fantasy wise. So maybe if you think Tampa Bay's defense is bad enough, that could be a thing. Shadur Sanders at 4,400. Don't hate it. Brosmer probably staying away from him, but you know to each his own, I guess, if you really are going crazy. So I think you can't go wrong with too many of these guys down here. I would just stay away from anybody playing a good defense. But the one I wrote down was Tua. I think out of all these cheap guys, he is going to be the best. Sanders may get some play in some of my leagues, but other than that, and even Gino. I mean, I know this feels like a terrible play just because of matchup and how Gino has looked, but Gino's going to take his shots, and it's a division game. Nobody's going to be playing Geno Smith. And so if you're someone who's making multiple lineups in tournaments, maybe, you take a flyer on somebody like that. Wouldn't be my QB play of the day, right? But certainly someone that can help out. Okay, so now let's go to the running backs. Josh Taylor, or Taylor here, he's one of those things where or Josh Taylor, Jonathan Taylor. He's one of those guys that in most situations, especially in these big games, he's always someone you can consider. I just don't love him in this game. I just don't love him in this spot by any means. Because teams are very simply now that, especially now that they know Daniel Jones is injured, they're just playing him, right? They are just playing to stop him. And yes, he could have a massive game. Yes, he could, go for 4 touchdowns and just go nuts. But his price is still really, really high. And so, once again, if you're doing multiple lineups, maybe there's a world in which you have him as, one of your top guys. But I just don't see that if you're making one lineup, having him in there is not going to be the way that I would go, especially when you have Devon A Chain at 8,800. So yes, Devon is also very expensive, but he has a favorable matchup, and the usage rate on him is just going to be off the charts as it always is. So that's my high price guy I like, right? I think A Chain is the one I will be going with out of all these guys. Now Robinson, Bijan, right? Sorry, not someone I'm putting in lineups. Honestly, like Jonathan Taylor, I may give a look in one lineup out of the ones I make. Robinson may not even make any of them, and it's not a knock on him. It's just that Seahawks defense is so good, and when you have the way the Falcons offense is playing, it's just so predictable that Robinson is going to be the guy that's going to need to shoulder the load, and so for him to at 8,500, it's just tough for me when we see A Chain in that same spot. If I'm going to be paying up, I might as well get myself Taylor or A Chain, right? That's just the way I view that. Um, Next guy I do like is James Cook. I think this is a great matchup for James Cook. This is one of the concerns with Josh Allen is think about his price, right? So what did we say Josh Allen's price was? 7,700, right? 7,800. James Cook is now more expensive than Josh Allen. And so that's the only thing that really kind of holds me back here is that if Cook is the one that goes off, well, you're happy to pay that price. But there is a world in which Josh Allen is taking his touchdowns. There is a world in which Josh Allen is the one leading this, charge. And even though James Cook is gonna, we know for sure there's going to be a lot of runs. Okay, there's no question about that. The Bills are going to run the football, but if Cook doesn't break those big touchdowns, if he just gets his yards, we would prefer to have Josh Allen if he's the ones getting those touchdowns. So it's a very concerning thing for both of those guys playing them is you're kind of guessing which one is going to be the one that gets in the end zone and which one has the day. So if you think that's going to be James Cook, that's one of those things where you can definitely go with him. I definitely like his, situation. Derrick Henry and Bucky Irving didn't put them down as running backs who I actually like in this spot all that much. And the reason for that is more about the price and what you could get. The truth of the matter is, a lot of my DFS lineups end with 300 salary left over. I just don't see, even in if Cook doesn't have, a massive game, I'd be hard pressed to see Derrick Henry putting up way bigger numbers than Cook just because of this matchup. I think the Steelers, they're going to be they're coming off a loss. They're going to be looking to play their best game. Obviously, the Ravens are going to be looking to play their best game. I think if the Ravens win that game, it's going to be on the back of Lamar, not on the back of Derrick Henry. And don't get me wrong, Henry can go off, and maybe this is something that can differentiate yourself. It's just tough for me to look at Cook and say Henry's the one I expect more to go off because I just don't. In Irving, obviously, there's a 800 point difference there. That's fine. But Irving's coming off some injuries, and he did look good last week. That's definitely true. So maybe that's the difference maker there. But I just don't think the matchup is as good. I look. I know he's playing the Saints. It just doesn't feel to me like a Bucky Irving day, especially when we get to the next guy I have written down, which is Josh Jacobs. The Bears have looked pretty good this year, but this Packers team, right? This is a mess. This is going to be a message sending game from either side, from the Bears or from the Packers. And I think Josh Jacobs at 6,800 at this price, if they give him the rock as much as he's going to want the rock, there's a good world that he could, really, really have a day on that Bears defense. And to pair that with the guy that we have next on the list, Chase Brown, you have two guys around that price. Really, really like both of those guys, right? I think both of them you can make an argument, and they will be in different lineups for me. It depends how the salary stuff shakes out, but they're not too expensive, and yet these are guys that are going to be making plays in their offenses. Now, this is an interesting one with Kyron Williams because Kyron Williams, we talked about this game that I didn't like anybody in this game. One guy I would think that you consider as a flyer is Kyron Williams, right? Because he's, if they get up big, they're going to be running the football. Now, Blake Corum was taking a lot of snaps and getting a lot of carries last week too, so that makes me a little cautious. And considering the guys that we have all around him, I don't necessarily love the play, but it's someone that I wouldn't. It's not someone I wrote down on my list as people I'm going to be considering, but it's also not someone who I'm like out on, right? Completely. Another one I wrote down was Brees Hall. He's playing Miami, and he is one of the best players on this offense. 6,500 probably won't be in a ton of my lineups because I think, once again, it's about that price, right? I mean, if you're right around the Josh Jacobs or the Chase Browns, I'm going to probably be upgrading to them, considering it's only $200, $300. But he might be a difference maker, right? And he could have a pretty big game. So he's someone that you could definitely consider. Judkins, I would consider him, but once again, it's just the fact that we have other players in this price that I think in more favorable matchups, but I wouldn't be against it by any means. ETN, I'm way out on ETN. Another guy I had last week who just killed me. I mean, just killed me. Like there were lineups that would have cashed if ETN had played, just decent, right? If he had just had a decent game. So he's not someone I'm looking at all. Genty is another one, just not looking at him much. I do think that Geno Smith has the ability to make those big plays and to, overcome this defense with how this offense is structured. They've just done such a disservice to Genty this year. I don't see a world in which he is having a big game against Denver. But there's, once again, in tournaments, sometimes you take those flyers on guys who are going to be low owned. Jalen Warren, don't hate it, but Gainwell was really taking a lot of his carries. So I just can't, it's just not something that I can necessarily, be like, oh, that's something I'm going to be doing. So I understand why people like in a perfect world, right? In a perfect game, yeah, Warren is a fine play, but there's just too much uncertainty. Swift can't do it because they have this Monangai guy that's also taking carries, and I don't think Green Bay is necessarily a great, matchup. So I understand they're probably going to be running the football, but you just don't want to have, especially at 5,900. If Swift was way cheaper and he was a value play, I would consider it, but not at this level. Mason, this is one of the guys I wrote down. 100% Jordan Mason. I would consider him, no question about it. Minnesota looked horrible, horrible, horrible on the offensive end last week, and so part of that is going to be resetting and getting that run game going. Right, that's going to be part of it. So at 5,800, there's no question that I would consider him. So keep him in mind. 5,800. Like I said, if you can't spend up, because now we're getting to a point where 900, 1,000 salary left over, you're not going to have that too often, right? And so you're not going to be able to upgrade too much. So Mason is certainly a play. RJ Harvey, once again, similar to Mason, I really think that Harvey, has potential in like the matchup number one. The offense hasn't necessarily been clicking on all cylinders all the time. Don't hate it at 5,700. I will say I prefer Mason in this case. Kenneth Walker the third. I wrote him down. I know we said we have nobody in that game. I don't hate the play, but the problem I have is number one. Obviously, he's in a situation where Charbonnet does get some carries as well. That's why his price is so low. And it's kind of the tough thing about all three of these running backs we're talking about is when your offense stinks, right? When your offense absolutely stinks, it really hurts the run game at times too. It's like a chicken or the egg thing. It's like, well, if you have a good run game, your offense looks better. But it's just when teams can kind of not have to worry about you beating them all the time over the top, then all of this kind of struggles, right? And so for Atlanta, if they're able to just and I like Sam Darnold, don't get me wrong, but if they're able to make it so Sam Darnold is, kind of in a bad way, right? If he's seeing ghosts, as they say, then I think that's one of those things where you just got to stick away, right? But I don't hate Walker, but I don't think it's a great play necessarily. You go down here. I mean, Aaron Jones. I don't know what the deal is with his injuries at this point. So we'll give an update when we actually make the lineups on that. But if Jones is going to be splitting carries with Mason, you probably could just get rid of Mason. In my view, I probably would be off him. But I do think, considering Aaron Jones is cheaper, if Aaron Jones does play, maybe you consider going with him. Managai, same thing as Swift. Knight, don't have much in the way of him. Neal obviously depends on Kamara, but that's one to be considered. Charbonnet, this is one of those things where him and Gainwell, right? You're just kind of taking a chance that one of them get in. And I'm looking down here to see if there's any other guys. I mean, Tuin, he was the one taking points from ETN last week. Maybe Corum, if you think he's going to get his run. I mean, these are all plays you can consider, right? Not guys you're going to be going with, but guys you can consider. P. Ryan in a game against Buffalo where it's going to be high scoring, he's usually in there as their third down back, so maybe you consider him. So that's the running backs. As we said, the guys I'm really high on are A-Chain, James Cook, Josh Jacobs, Chase Brown, Breece Hall, and RJ Harvey. My guess is I'm going to be sitting around Josh Jacobs and Chase Brown as the two that are going to be getting the most play because James Cook and his price, just unlikely I'm going to be fitting him into a ton of lineups, if any, depending on how many I put Josh Allen in. Okay, wide receivers. Let's go to wide receivers now. So I'm going to be avoiding Smith and Jigba in this one and Puka. I just don't love their matchups and the price that you're paying for them. They're the two highest priced receivers, and I think they have two of the worst matchups, to be fair. And I shouldn't say in the league, but I just think their matchups are just not good, right? And they're the highest priced. So that leads us to the guy I will be going, in some of these, and that is Jamar Chase. I mean, at 8,200, he's the third most expensive, and I think he probably has the highest upside of anyone here, right? He's the only one out of all these guys that I could really see having that 35, 40 point game. Like that's the type of game he can have. And so, and once again, Puka and Smith and Jigba, those guys can tear it up. I get it, right? They can certainly do it. And I understand even you look at it's interesting because I think this is the rank of the team they're playing. And so they're actually saying Smith and Jigba is a better play, than Chase. They're actually saying Puka is as well. I'm just going off eye test here. I just can't, in my view, I just can't look at Jamar Chase in this big game and think that these two are the better plays, being more expensive. Just not going to happen. Devontae Adams, look, he is 7,700, and so he's not someone that I'm considering. I don't think he's going to necessarily be, a great play, but he gets red zone touches as we saw last game. And if you don't feel like paying up for Puka and you can fit Devontae in there, pretty good. Then we get to, so I don't know what's going on with Drake London, whether he's in or not. Not going to be interested in Drake London anyways this week, as good as he is. But this is the guy who I think is going to be in almost all of my lineups. And I'm actually going to take a pen right now and I'm going to put a little star next to him on my notes because this guy, I think, is going to have a massive game. Massive game. Look, I understand the problems they have at the QB position. I completely get it. But there's something about playing against Seattle's defense that will do that to you, right? I understand the Washington Commanders just had a very good game, right? And they looked a lot better. Doesn't matter to me. Doesn't matter, right? This is Justin Jefferson, a guy who earlier in the year, from my memory, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, was up here in terms of how much you had to pay for him, right? He was up there, has now fallen to 6,900. Too much value there for me to pass up. And I think one of the things about Justin Jefferson is if you get the ball near him, he's going to make a catch. We know that. He's going to make a catch if you get the ball anywhere near him. And so against the Seahawks, the problem was the ball wasn't even getting out, right? You couldn't even get the ball out. As long as you can get the ball out and you could find Justin Jefferson, look at that rank. Give me Justin Jefferson all day. And at that price, I just can't pass it up. He will be in a lot of my lineups. Next one, Jalen Waddle. Uh, Another one I'm going to be deeply considering in a lot of lineups. I just think he is someone that if you think, he probably not in a lot of them. Like Justin Jefferson will be in as many as possible. Waddle is going to be in definitely if I do a two-a stack, right? And you just have to, once again, guys like Waddle, they have just such high upside, right? This is a guy who part of the reason he's even that low is because of how bad this team has looked all year and because A Chain is taking a lot of different stuff, right? He's taking a lot of that usage, but he's a talented player, a very talented player. And when you figure Tyreek Hill is out injured, that means this guy's the number one, in terms of receivers. You got to give him some love there, I would say. Next one is Olave. He will be another one. I'm not going to put a star next to him like I did Jefferson because Jefferson I think is going to go off, but he's someone that's getting close to that, right? Because this is a situation where if I'm having a New Orleans lineup against what we've seen with this Bucks team, this is one of those division games that could be crazy, right, and have a lot of scoring. So Olave, if that is the case, I think Olave is going to be the dude that does it, right? He's going to be the one that's going off and making some of these touchdown grabs. So I love him, 6,500. Like I said, I think he's going to get overtaken by Jefferson in a lot of those lineups just because the price is so close. But man, I'll have my eyes on Olave. Abuka, or I guess we're going to run it back again. I do like him this week. Once again, that might be even a game I stack, right? Maybe we just get some big touchdowns. So Ibuka is another one I am certainly considering. Flowers is another one I definitely will consider just because Pittsburgh's defense has struggled. And if you think, in the game I play Lamar, right? If one of my lineups has Lamar Jackson, then there's no question in my mind that I'm going to be playing him a little bit. So he's another one. Zay Flowers will certainly be getting some looks. Brian Thomas Jr., probably not. I played him last week. He was fine. I just don't love that indie game. Now, in if I decide to make a lineup that's a stack with that game, he's going to be one of the guys that's in there, right? If I do decide to do that. Roma Dunze, no real interest in that Chicago. I should have put that in one of the games. I'm going to be avoiding a lot of stuff in that game. I just think that's going to be a defensive battle, right? And so maybe Josh Jacobs is the only one out of that I really have interest in. Jacoby Myers is another one. He had a good game last week. Wilson, fine, right? He's fine. Actually, I didn't write this guy down, but Cortland Sutton, worthy of. I'm not going to be playing probably either of these guys, but Cortland Sutton, I'll consider him actually at 5,600. That seems to be the salary that I always find myself needing around there. So 5,600, he's someone to get a look on. I'm actually going to write him down here because I didn't see him when I was doing my research. Cortland Sutton for sure. Next one, Franklin. Yeah, I mean, much like Sutton, there's no reason one of those two guys you could put in different lineups. There's no question about it. Debo, not interested in Debo. Michael Pittman in that game, he's at 5,400, and he's another guy. He has that top tier upside, right? He can have those big games. You just got to pick the right one. DK Metcalf, another one. Can't go wrong with any of these guys I'm mentioning right now. He's another one can have a big game. So it's just about getting him the ball, and can they? Chris Godwin, funny enough, last game he actually had some really good moments. And so if you need a guy that's cheap, I would consider it. But and here's the big one, okay? Because like I said, I'm all in on Pittman as well. But here's the big one in my opinion: Shakir. Shakir, he dropped a touchdown. I think he ran a little bit too fast. That's what it was, and ended up not being able to get that touchdown. Shakir killed me last week. He really did. If he had gone off like I thought he was going to, I would have cashed in a bunch of lineups. I think he's going to have a huge game, right? He is the perfect pair with Josh Allen in this one because that salary is just so good to look at. And he is a hot and cold guy, but after how he played last week, there's a world in which I see Shakir going off. I really like Shakir in this one. Really, really, really like Shakir in this one. So we're going to be considering him. Terry McLaurin, I mean, you're getting him at so cheap, right? You certainly are, but I just can't. Even Watson, like these guys, I just can't take a risk on him. Pierce is another one. He could have a big game, could not. Here's another one I really like in terms of a value play at receiver, Jordan Addison. Same reason I like Jefferson in the sense of if this is a game where this offense gets going a little bit, well, then Addison, right, at only 4,900, you should find some room for him in your lineup, right? There's no question. If you can't get Jefferson in there, Addison's a good second on that. Dobbs, just if you think the Packers offense is going to light up this defense, then one of these receivers is going to be the reason for doing it. Mooney, no interest. DJ Moore, I have interest in him. Maybe I'll have him in a lineup, but just can't trust a ton of lineups with him. But once again, DJ Moore is one of those guys this year that the passing game hasn't been there as much, but he has upside of 30 points, right? He could put up major numbers if it's in the right spot. Let's see, keep going down. Shaheed is another one I was considering, because he can get those big plays. Not sure I'm gonna, and now these are the last two we're going to talk about here. Actually, there's going to be three that we really talk about here. I'm seeing another one now that I didn't see before, but Cooper Kupp, 4,100. No reason you can't consider him because of what we've seen in the past. But once again, that's an extreme value play. Jerry Jeudy, I really like him in this one actually as an extreme value play. It's like he has that upside. There was a play, I don't know, if you watched that Browns game last week, there was a play he was open for a massive touchdown, and Shadur Sanders just overthrew him ever so slightly. It would have been a huge play. That might be connected against the Tennessee Titans. So keep that in mind. At 4,200, you could take that risk. Malik Washington, he's a guy I always find a way to get into lineups because it just feels like they use him, in interesting ways that can get in the end zone. And so it's hit or miss. He didn't really work out last week, but against the Jets, anything can certainly happen. And then finally, the last player we're really considering is Keon Coleman, right? Keon Coleman is just one of those guys that came into some high, expectation, has not lived up to it in any way, shape, or form to this point, but he can. And we saw it last week where he caught a touchdown. Maybe that's the turning point in a game like this will be against the Bengals. And that defense, there's nothing that tells me you can't give this guy a shot, right? And then there's probably some other guys down here too, like Shepard. Could he get in the end zone and stuff like that? But those are all the receivers that we like in this game. Now let's move over to the tight end position. Okay, so we have a few. There's a lot of value at the tight end position. So obviously on the high side, I don't hate Tyler Warren. I'm out on McBride and I'm out on Bowers for this one. Just don't think because of the way that you can get such cash savings at the tight end position, because you really, really can, right? There is a big way for you to be able to pay up for other big guys by saving money at the tight end position. I just can't tell myself I'm going to spend 6,000 or 8,000 on a tight end when neither one of their matchups are all that great. The biggest one, though, is Tyler Warren. Look, this guy, if anybody's watched Daniel Jones over the years, what is it that you see? He always has had these players in a way that could be his security blanket, right? And Tyler Warren is one of those guys. And in a big game like this, if this offense gets rolling again, he's going to be a big part of the red zone offense. And I think he's going to be, if the Jags bring a blitz, find me Tyler Warren, right? Find that guy. And I understand he's at 5,000. So you're not getting quite the savings you might, but I don't hate that. I just don't hate that at 5,000. He will be in some of my lineups. Not a fan of Ertz, not a fan of Kincaid in this one. I don't even know what his health is. Maybe I will be a fan. I shouldn't say that. When we do our official lineups and all of these injury news are kind of all sorted out or closer to being sorted out, he might be someone I consider at 4,300. At this point, not interested in him. Kyle Pitts, sorry, not interested against Seattle. Mark Andrews was someone that I do have a little bit of interest in that game, because I think in these big games you have a guy like Mark Andrews show up, right? You have him in the red zone, and certainly, um, you know, Lamar looks for these guys in the red zone. There's no question about it. So he's someone I would consider, no question about it. I do have Juwan Johnson written down just because there's something about these tight ends in these division games that seems to go well. So we're considering him. You could consider Darren Waller, but not someone I'm going to be looking at too heavily, just because it is such a risk with that team. You have A-Chain, you have Waddle. There's a lot that has to happen for Waller to have those big games. Fannin Jr., I feel like this is kind of one that you could potentially do. 3,700 though. I don't necessarily love Fannin, but don't hate him either. Now, one I really do like, and this is doubling down from last week that screwed me, but Kate Otten, 3,600. Really think that's a value play. Really think that's a value play. So I'm going to have him in a lot of lineups. As we go down here and I'm looking, Hawkinson's another one. I'm interested to see. I just want to see. Yeah, you look at his targets. Hawkinson is another one I really do like here too. I'm gonna actually put a star next to him and I think the two tight ends that I'm gonna give the most looks to are those two. You think about the cash savings you're getting by putting in one of these guys. So let's just do this for the sake of the video. Let's throw Hawkinson in there. Look at what this did, right? So I'll do this again. Let me go back down here. Think about, so right now for you, the average, salary is 5,555, right? So if I let's throw in Hawkinson, and now let's throw in a defense. So that just got us up 300. Now let's throw in a defense. Let's say we won't do even the lowest one. We'll give the benefit of the doubt here. Let's just put in, um, what defense should we put it? Let's just say we'll put in the Browns defense. You're already up over 6,000. That means at all the rest of everyone we do, right? We can get 6,000. Now let's throw in one more. Let's throw in one value play that you're going to have. Let's throw in a guy we like, Shakir. We're at 6,200. Think about the way you're building out cash savings, right? Just by going low on tight ends. You're in a whole nother bracket of player, right? Just by doing that. And if you go even cheaper on defense, now we're talking, you're getting way up there. And so I think Hawkinson is another tight end I really, really like and I will be using. And then I had another one. This is a risk, okay? I'm telling you now, this is a major, major risk, because it is, just to be fair. But this is another guy I was considering. This is the big dude. Look at his targets: 4, 2, 5. I don't hate this. For his price at 2,600, let's do his price. Let's see the cash savings we get from him. That's almost a 6,000 on his own. And so there is going to be games where I throw in Darnell Washington at 2,600 just to give it a shot. Okay. Now let's head over and we're going to end the video after this, but to defense. Um, there's a few defenses that I like. I think obviously with the Seahawks, that feels like a play that you are just going off of last week because of how good they did. I don't know if at 4,000 they're worth it this week. Now, I think they're going to be great because they have been all year. And actually, let's. Oh no, we can't see their thing, but oh no, we can, right? We just click right here. Okay. Does it show 30, 21, right? This is what I'm talking about is you have these games where the defense they've been somewhat consistent all year, right? Doing well in some of these spots. But if you're paying 4K, you really want this, right? You really want this. And so just not going to be interested in them this week. The Broncos, of course, they're a play, right? If the Raiders play how the Raiders have played, they are going to get absolutely destroyed by the Broncos defense. But the warning here is that it is a division game. Anything can happen, right? The Rams against the Cardinals, I don't hate that. The problem is I just can't trust the Cardinals, right? They might go out there and look phenomenal. They might go out there and look terrible. We don't really know. So I'm not going to probably be touching that one, especially at that price. The Browns defense, 100% I will be considering them going up against Cam Ward, a rookie QB. They're going to be in some lineups. Buccaneers defense don't have a whole lot of don't really have a whole lot for them. I think this game might be a little bit high scoring at times, so don't have a ton of stuff with them. The Ravens, there's a world in which that Ravens defense looks good, right? There's a world in which they really put a beating on Pittsburgh. The Bills defense, not interested in them at all. Miami's defense, maybe, but I just don't see why. I don't think it's low enough for you to really get a ton of cash savings off that. But there could be turnovers with the Jets, so I'm not, ruling that one out. We'll have more on these defenses, I think, as we're building the lineups because that's going to be more telling. Colts, 3,200. I could see it, right? I mean, that Colts defense is good, but still, it just not a great game. The Packers, I don't hate their defense here. I think 3,100, they're so low down there, but the Bears, they're as good as the Bears have been. They're probably due, right, for maybe a game in which they don't look that great. And I think if you just are trying to look at some cash savings and you're looking at a team that's not going to have the bottom fall out defensively, don't hate them. The Vikings, I'm actually going to write them down. Oh, I already did because they're one I will certainly be considering. I'm going to put a star next to them because there's no question, right, that they're going to be really, really good in this one. The Titans, I don't hate either because there is a world in which Shadur Sanders looks terrible in this one, and that offense looks terrible. My issue is that you just, when you're looking at the Vikings defense or even the Commanders defense below it, I just don't see, the Titans to me are just not trustworthy enough. I would prefer to go with the one above or below. Commanders, like I said, there's a chance there. The Jags, probably not going with them. Steelers, not really interested in that one either. Falcons, not interested in that one. Even because the problem is, look, I think I don't think Falcons defense is going to play terrible. I don't know if the Seahawks are going to score a ton, but it's just to me the risk reward isn't fully there. Although this one is cheaper, so maybe the Falcons defense isn't completely out. The Jets, there's a world in which that works, but no, I'm not going to be going that way. Bears, no. Saints, no. Cardinals, no. Bengals, no. And Raiders, like I said, this is one I actually will be considering in some way. Let's just look at the cash savings from this. Think about that. Gets us right up to 6,000 already. So, and we've seen what this offense can do. Actually, I'm interested to see what does this Raiders defense put up fantasy points wise. I mean, 4, 5, 2, 10, 0, 16, 4, 3, 1, 5, 10. I mean, look, this, if let's say we played this, right, and we got a 4 or a 5 or a 10 at this price, I don't hate that. It's not going to be in every lineup, but the Raiders, I'm actually going to write them down. I think they're a good value play. If this means we could get more players that we like, if this means that because we have a lot of receivers we like and running backs we like that are around that 60, 6,000 range, right? And they might be a little tougher to get if you're playing a defense. This could be $1,000 in cash savings from one of these. Could be 1,800 in savings from up here. So I do not hate the Raiders defense in this spot by any means. All right, so that's our preview. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.